Summary, so there's a few more. Okay, you want to get chairs. So, do you know anybody in medical? 5 or 7 chairs.
Well, good morning to you. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay,
So I gotta like, I gotta go on and leave, like I started it, and then turn out show this morning, and I gotta do that quick. But I didn't know like where the camera is. But when I heard it, he brought up his, I wanted to move it, and like, I saw that last time. I was like, I just. I only did that because when I was talking to my dad about like the life thing, and how like, but like. That's why I wanted to say. I report you guys.
No, I don't think I signed no papers for me. Yeah.
Tell me that one. Tell me that story. You're recorded every day in here anyway, because I always put Zoom on. Oh, you're right. But Zoom doesn't have your faces and your masks and your attitudes and your opening eyes. Snobby? Yeah. I'm almost. I don't give a shit that you're almost. My boyfriend is started like that. Look at me, Paul. You can start going up there and put chairs around so I can get on the camera.
Like on this side? Because I'm number 3.
Okay.
Okay, this should be more than. Fine, very fine. Something like that.
And you don't want it too close. So you want it to be really. I only read something that not.
Oh, yeah, so what's up with there were one like. Anyway, I remember one quote. So a bunch of kids were playing with face on it.
Sounds right.
And I just remember this one quote and
Deep
it's over
breath.
and over again. It's like,
You should have to. Should.
Like I did the work. Yeah. No, like I've never showered in my locker, never showered.
Oh, sleep away.
And then I like, I'm like, I'm gonna sit off, man. That's
Yeah, every day, I go home, I take a shower, I don't like showers here, because I go in that bathroom, it smells like.
no, and then I'm like, I'm like, my boyfriend's gonna jail, so I'm like, there's no shower. I'm like, so, whatever. I'm just kidding.
I gotta be saying that wait, I eat a lot. I mean, I eat a lot.
Did you say? Yeah. That's so right. It's getting dark.
PowerPoint or anything to share that one, social media? All right. Well, you do. I mean, like, really, what is the solution? Tribal council, change that. Our whole argument.
We need to figure out solutions today.
I mean, you're going with the engaged, so yes. Is it a measure?
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I know. There's one of them asked me
You
to
tell most
looking
of
out
them
for.
are taking work.
I know it's her. Spring semester, Brett told me, he goes, you won't believe. it." I go, "What?"
I've done a lot of crying, 4-hour, 6-hour crams, and like my family's like, are you okay? I'm like, "Oh, God."
Hold on today for a while.
I know you look, except for your shoes.
They're in class.
But everything else,
Or they're not in the group, so they don't have to show up. We have to listen to their word.
I don't want this word big signs, but. Come on, Zoom down, listen to some people. Come on, you don't watch that
I did.
I watched the.
Okay, group, you can come up and
Yeah,
just practice a little bit, watch for the wires, so you might want to go around your friends.
Are we first?
There's only one.
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah, you can go up and get the range, and your data up, before we get started. 5 minutes, okay, so just get a little organized, and we'll get the show on the road. Oh, yeah,
Right?
Find your place to sit if you're in the medical room.
No, not really. After you get over it, you got to work out this.
But I'm just not gonna do it. Take your blood pressure. I And I usually give them 5 minutes until they get adjusted, so that, you know, they know where they're sitting, they get their back open. Wednesday, we only have 1, and then Friday, we have 2, so Friday we'll run both. We'll get situated and start them up.
What's the solution? Oh, we did not.
You have time, it's just to get organized.
Okay, evaluate each solution according to the criteria a person set as a group. Pick the best solution. Okay, we said pick the evaluate each solution and pick the best solution. So I can go.
Yeah, that's it. We need more mental health resources and more. Yeah.
Oh, candy.
Your fingers wiggle, my fingers kind of.
She was ill last week, so I haven't heard this week, so just, if she's not. She called.
No, you're right. You need better. Yeah, but Everyone was there. Good job. Everyone was there.
We need to do a,
Yes, very good.
my grandparents. And we have a discussion and we could turn it in.
Just kidding. Just kidding, no. It's an
I'm just trying
They're all integrated.
So right now, we've got, I'm just taking the 10.
Okay,
No
no, you do that.
Jaden, no Jared.
Yeah, there are.
I'm taking my.
Oh,
Yeah, Dylan's here, Jennifer,
Oh, in the morning.
Rhiannon's here, Riley. Okay, so I've got four in this group. We can have a few more minutes before we
Have a
begin.
four-title meeting.
It's an individual grade.
Yeah, all right, try it. So you document stuff to do today.
Well, it should be, when's your group due? When is your group on?
Wednesday.
Then make sure you have it done before then, because I went into theirs this morning and I only read the summary, so I thought I'd have 3 minutes. But generally, the outline is due the day you perform, your summary is due the day you perform, but you should really have it done. I mean, it's not a huge
So we don't do
assignment.
like this, our summary, well, I'm playing that, different down, what you're saying, it in that way. We don't do that.
You have to be in the group doc and get 0.
Okay.
I thought I was very clear last week and I will be really clear today.
There's a lot of. I know, you get the broad base.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not
A lot.
no, not everything else. I'm breaking the.
But you tell me before class, not in class, okay? All right, so do you have somebody who's going to introduce, or are you each going to introduce yourself? That's easiest, okay? And most of you will speak for around 2 minutes. Don't worry about the time, but when you have 200 words, that's usually okay.
Well, we can introduce ourselves and then she'll go over the question and our solution.
Right, and you have a nice outline and you have good contributions, and so it's nothing to really stress over. My whole point, the objective is to get you into databases to research and then upchuck in a summary. And if you haven't danced in there before, you're gonna be dancing in there as a student for a long time. So that's the objective where I'm coming from, because in the next 2 speeches, you have to have 3 references from those databases. So it's a little more complex, and you don't get group people to share stuff with. You are all your own solo. So I always feel for my online class, because there's no group discussion built into it. And even when we were on Zoom, groups work. They went in breakout rooms, they, you know, we got chatty Cathy's, there's some that totally read. But groups can work online. I've been in them. So they, you know, it's not just writing. We do a lot of talking, discussion. Oral tradition lets us do that. All right, any other questions from the medical group? I am recording and then I'll upload. Well, I'll upload the Zoom, but the Zoom will get the side profile and the owl is on, so you're getting recorded there. But this will be a little bit shorter because it's just going to be the group discussion at the whole Zoom class. Anything else? Anything else from the other groups? You guys are good? Looks like some are really quite organized and contributing. Have you ever done that? If you can't, all right, once you start.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, there's a movie. Will you take it? I'm like, I'm going to order it for you. We didn't start coordinating to school.
Sure, we can go. There's one thing that we can do is that we just did it.
You have to have it in to do it. Well, you have to do it before I give you any points. You're in Google Docs. Oh, okay. He's not in Google Docs.
I was wondering.
It's called a group discussion. So I need all of your work. If I don't get it, all that goes in there.
You're like, oh.
Sometimes you need to, yeah, I need to record the pre-discussion, so I get the. It helps with the energy. Why not? I have all this sucker out there in class.
You're so sad.
Oh, got all of y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, we sent some, Cuban festival. Oh, whoa. Breathe.
On your mark, get set. And others try not to do your group discussion while others are speaking. I'm kind of sorry about that because it's like. You're not too weird.
Hello, my name is Nicole Gibbs. We got medical as our topic. Our question is, how has mental health historical trauma affected our tribal communities? But before we get to that and answer that, we're going to start with introductions.
Right, Leanna Blackwell there. I'm from Pet, Montana. I'm from the Sioux tribe.
I'm Jared Elk. I'm from the Yankton Sioux tribe.
My name is Nicole Gibbs. I'm from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe.
It's John Costello. I'm from the Fort Berthold reservation.
My name is Riley Allery and I'm from Tremont.
We each have our own specific question on our topic that we picked out. And we're going to be going over them from, we'll go from left to right.
So my article was historical trauma and Native American and Alaskan communities development in food countries. And talks a lot about the differences and the similarities between them. So this is the article proposes the idea between reservation dwelling children and urban living children. And many studies were done in comparison. First they asked the children their living situations and stated were there drugs and alcohol involved in the home. And both groups said yes. And they linked a series of emotional and mental trauma due to the use of substances. Most of the children from the reservation had higher traumatic experiences and had experienced more thoughts of hopelessness and suicide ideas. The urban children had more of a cultural unawareness and engage more in risky behaviors due to more economical benefactors and opportunities. Both had higher chances to be incarcerated as opposed to the other races. Lack of cultural education and loss of cultural background and other negative factors play a part in their development and delinquency in our Native American and Alaskan youth. A lot of Native American children and Alaskan youth repeat the cycle of drug use, alcoholism, because that's how they grew up with knowing. It's a repeated cycle that some children try to break when attending colleges and seeking a better life for their future. We need to help our children. They are our future. Native American and American youth have higher suicide rates than any other category. Because of the barriers of treatment centers that many cannot afford or do not have access to, Native American and Alaskan youth will continue to repeat the cycle that they are shown. Many turn to drugs and end up in the juvenile system or jail system. That's the key points of my article.
Public action was an article that mainly bases off of using creative programs for any tribal community and to help their tribal communities in a type way. For example, how I thought people rely on creativity as a coping mechanism in many tribal communities. I think creativity can go a long way when it comes, especially when it comes to many different tribal communities. And when I think creativity, it goes a long way. When it comes to many tribal communities, and when I say creativity, it could be through singing, dancing, art, and various hobbies. People can use these things to keep their minds occupied from any sort of trauma that they may have experienced, and a reason why it is the reason why it is mostly because it could be better for and more healthier way to cope than to see anyone resort to any substance. And the way people can use these creative paths could be through introducing both children and adults to any creative path that they may choose. Even learning their native language and their native way of life could help through their past trauma or / historic trauma. Using imaginative programs to support tribal communities and done in contemporary ways, or even more tribal programs can enhance local food systems and create housing that allows residents to more easily support each other.
Okay, I'm gonna go next. How to manage historical trauma by teaching our tribal communities awareness for resilience helps the foundation of the future in the USA. So I did look at an article and I saw 3 solutions, and they are basically so I had 3 solutions that I was going to bring up, but I told a personal story because it really advocates the point. But okay, in this world, there's different historical trauma, but the one that feels the most cruel is the genocide through years of the systems in place and conditioning cycle that has been broken or fully restored. Talk about a heavy load to want to heal our tribes and people like it is written in our life story from the Creator. I wasn't sure how to explain to the audience with patience and self-control my ideas and the flood of words and feelings that come with it. Because I asked my dad a question regarding my last name Gift, and another married family name was brought into question. And my dad's response was that it wasn't his last name used today. The family and the name came from a family that took him in. He has 3 living siblings with different last names. This is why our tribal people are resilient, like the soldier, like the no soldier left behind. I feel no brother or sister or auntie or uncle left behind through our pain and grief and poverty. We have our ancestors and fellow tribal people to step up with no questions asked because our culture and survival have relied on it and our system and why we prosper forward. I close with this is proof we are resilient. we are still here. The United States of America has 574 recognized tribes, and I brought that up because it is just a name and it's claiming. But in our culture and our tribal communities with mental health and everything, we take on children. There's nobody left behind. Not represented. Thank you.
Before I go over mine, I'd like to go over the question again. It was how has mental health / historic trauma affected our tribal communities? Now, my question is, or how I went for it, for how the COVID-19 pandemic affected our tribal communities. Indian tribes and villages have long histories and traditions. While the U.S. is largely a country of individuals with individual rights, Indian tribes and communities are more community-based. This tribal / community outlook is one of the most important distinctions between indigenous and non-indigenous people in the U.S. Nowhere was this more evident than how tribal communities reacted to COVID. While each tribal community having their own sovereignty amongst them, they each have set their own kind of rules or guidelines when it comes to COVID. With the first case of COVID in March of 2020, tribal leadership rapidly enforced isolation and shelter in place with policies as well as border checks to contain transmission of the virus. Mass social distancing and virtual learning were set in place almost immediately. Families with confirmed cases were quarantined while voluntary supplied delivery systems sprang to life. And I'd like to say for during this point, once during the fall surge in Pine Ridge reservations, they were locked down for non-essential travel for a week.
So my article was titled, Understanding and Healing Historical Trauma. I wrote, historical trauma has many characteristics. Some of these characteristics include patterns of thought, our emotions, and certain behaviors that affect our daily life. There have been many studies on mental levels of depression, substance abuse, and suicide among youth. A big part of historical trauma in Native Americans was the assimilation of boarding schools. Boarding schools forced for people to lose their culture, language, and traditions. There was a study conducted on Native American elders that measured historical trauma. The elders were chosen specifically because in our culture, they are known for having larger guns. When given the chance to speak, the elders considered the main causes of historical trauma to be the loss of land and language, boarding schools, and substance abuse. The elders were targeted with this experiment because they have the ability to provide cultural competence and ethical services. After this experiment was conducted, one of the participants stated that people are not as happy as they used to be because of all the things going on. Another participant stated that degrading messages such as kill the Indian, save the man has led to an internalized depression in our people. The participants then gave ideas to mental health professionals on how to heal historical trauma for generations to come.
Hey, did your group define the key words?
Oh, yeah. We given them out. Our definitions: mental illness, tribal communities, Native American or indigenous historic trauma, line of duty, first responders, and socioeconomic status. Personal mental illness are health conditions involving changes in emotions, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Tribal communities, tribe and anthropology, notional form of human social organization based on a set of smaller groups known as bands having temporary or permanent political integrations and defined by traditions of common set, language, culture, and ideology. Native American or indigenous historic trauma. Historic trauma is a cumulative, multi-generational collective experience of emotional and psychological injury in communities and in descendants. The effects of historical trauma among Native Americans and indigenous includes changes in traditional ways of child rearing, family structures, and relationships.
The reason why I chose that definition is because it defines it like exactly. The general I'll do the line of duty, all that is authorized, required, or not only associated with some field or responsibility. First responders, someone designated or trained to respond to an emergency, socioeconomic status, is the social standing of class of an individual or group. And then our okay. Okay, so establishing better mental health resources for our tribal communities is our group solution.
Stay put. Thank you. Now we'll do a little Q&A from our audience. In the audience, do we have any questions or reflections about the information that this group presented? Did anything stick out? Otherwise, I can give you a quiz, but I'd rather not. I have one ready in a Google form. I'm so sick. It's Valentine's.
I know.
Okay, so let's just, you guys stay put. Let's just go through their group because we're gonna learn by listening and doing some analysis here. So let's go with Brianna's. What did she discuss? Help out group if they can't remember.
Her question, or hers was.
I was basically about the mental health of children and how the development of literacy from, trauma.
Is there anything the group in the audience would want to add to that she presented?
I think the biggest thing is when it involves the children and the historical trauma. I'm a prime example. Everything that we have discussed is my life and it is passed on to our children. And it is very, very hard to be older and not have an identity, especially as a child. And it is different the way that the culture is. If somebody passes away on the reservation, there's a different way of the community finding out, there's a different responders, it's two different worlds when you think about it, but in the solution of it, it's just.
Anyone in the audience?
What do you think you guys could do, like, for your future generations, to, like, help them heal from generation trauma?
Good question.
I feel, and it's not only about me, there's other people in this panel that have children and have experiences. For me, I have taken my 5-year-old and at the time I newborn to a march. I have shown them, my oldest son is 5, and when he's in his room chanting, no justice, no peace against a murder for Ryan Gipp, that right there, that's teaching those kids that it matters and it's important. So just talking to them about culture, even if it's not going to marches, even if it's just being in your home and using Wasichu or white or different cultural languages and understanding, because our kids don't know that they're dark. They don't know that they're different until somebody says, why do you talk funny? Or somebody misunderstands. And that's a good question that I think you have kids also. So it's just every day getting up, teaching them the language, the food, and if anybody ever says anything, just have to be respectful and get out there, honestly.
Awesome. How about with Jared? What did the audience, is there a question of the summary and what he gave us for information? It was quite good, Jared. Really all contributed. So, but from the audience, no questions about the creative powers? The music and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay,
Besides music, he gave us a nice list, but that there's power in the creative use. You know, creativity is a power. Some people scoff and they laugh at creative folks.
So when I say creativity, it could just be more various to many types of like various, even art even. But even my creativity would just be like, you know, me teaching you guys last time about how to play Magic. That's something I truly love.
Yeah.
I would love to learn and teach people because it's a really fun game. That is my form of creativity that I love, and I would love to teach the people because it's just a really fun game to get into. And not that just varies like, you know, teaching people how to dance or something like that, or learn how to traditionally dance, tribal art, yeah, any tribal arts or anything like that. But it expands, when I say creativity, it just expands to a very large amount of various types of things you could do. And like I said, it's limited, not just limited to hobbies and stuff, but just how you would find a way to cope with, how you would find something that you would love personally, and using that to just occupy yourself instead of people wanting to go straight to a substance. And to me, I think creativity is a lot more better in a healthier manner than to go through.
Yeah, no, I'm getting goosebumps because it is to occupy time,
Yeah.
to find creative outlets,
Mhm.
and they're positive, even if you fail at painting.
And even, it could even consume your time. That's the best part about it. It's just the one thing that you love could consume your time on a daily basis.
Ooh, nice. Which helps them develop.
And even people who want, even trying to say the elders who actually want to teach young people the language. For them, I think that as the other form of creativity, because they're teaching. And to them, that helps them, I bet, get through their historic trauma.
Do you think that there's a limit to a person's individual imagination to creativity?
No, because to me, creativity can be very vast on how people can create many things. And who knows, someone could invent a game that just could be more popular than Magic the Gathering. It's very vast, and I have like no complete answer to say, but the best thing I could say about it is I would love to see imaginative and creative ideas expand.
I'd add on to that definitely because like from what he's saying or like summary, but it's just that atmosphere. If you can go somewhere and you can create that atmosphere, it doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter what you're doing, that's why we're doing, that's why we're doing. You know what I mean? That it's just, I don't know, because if everybody that's in here is from that cultural background, if you've seen anybody, I'll use, who was it? I think it was Jolene, she spoke with her in class. That created an atmosphere in this class because of one person. You know what I mean? Like that, it's not just the creativity, it's that existence, it's that beingness, you taking up that atmosphere in that space after years and years of generational trauma. And speaking, that is important, that is so important, and to hear a language, first of all, like to like make it shorter, just being allowed to come to school and talk about these things. Like my dad is 62 and there's things that he doesn't speak of as if it's still in effect, you know what I mean? And it's crumbling to watch that. I'll stop talking about it. Sorry about that, but I mean, I like that, it's the atmosphere. And then when you're teaching other kids and other people, and I mean, like Dr. Jane, you wouldn't be working here if you weren't creating that same atmosphere, you know, like, and I don't know how you keep that all bottled up when
That's
people
what I
say
mean.
mean things or you get discouraged.
That's what I mean when I say it's expensive, because
Yeah.
even then, there's like a lot of things that could happen to you, especially topics and ideas that could happen. But then there's also like the blocks in life, you know, the walls you gotta go through.
This is the tip of the iceberg. But that's okay. You can understand what's underneath there from our studies. So go home and do another 40 studies, summarize them. I mean, I really got one from each of you, but you know, you got into the databases and you saw how gnarly it can be, and that all of a sudden you start reading an article and you're going, what is this talking about? But that's the part of research, and that's where I push. And this is a topic that brings us either very, very apart or brings us together. And you know, just the Q and A's, you know, what I'm doing as a speech teacher is, okay, as a speech teacher, I'm seeing potential topics for your other speeches coming down. You know, so if Jared wants to keep some momentum going on this creativity thing, and he wants to do a speech to inform or a speech to persuade, go for it. And that's what group discussions can do. Any speech can do this. When you hear a decent speech or a decent group, it's giving you ideas for future work. It's not like, oh, we're done, put a lid on it, over. No, it's just starting, you know. This is a fundamentals class. You're just beginning with public speaking. This passion and this occupation and this limit to imagination, and it happens at certain ages. There are studies about this. People shut down. And that's without historical trauma. It's just middle school. They get into this wave and they refuse to go outward.
But it's hard to conform to that, and that's not how it originally was.
Yeah.
And then when you get old enough to realize it, you're like,
Right.
next.
That's why middle schoolers, my mother taught sixth grade for 35 years. She loved them. She just thought they were so ornery, as ornery as she was. But she would just always say wonderful things about that age 12. Because there is something that happens in the years, you know, and it's about this creativity thing and individual. So, and yeah, good. All right, Nicole, any questions for Nicole from the audience? Dylan?
Oh yeah, so COVID-19 has like massive impacts on like mental health, right? So
So
what are
I
some?
took it as a historic trauma for the fact that like, it's gonna be part of our history now, so it's gonna, and affected, roughly, see, there's, 5.2 million from Alaska natives to American natives, and that's broken up between 1.6%, so most of them are in the US. So that broken up to where each tribal community has their own sovereignty and their own kind of guidelines and rules for effective, effective, somebody does get sick, it's harder for them to leave, or, they can't leave, or they have to leave, and they get other people sick for effective and all.
Or community buildings for quarantine.
Yeah.
So how we want to like try to help with the mental health side of things?
The mental health, I didn't really go.
Because everyone's been like stuck in their houses for quite some time.
Oh,
Some of them.
yeah, they had, voluntary transportation, for people who, on tribal communities that were on quarantine for 10 days. They had, people who were voluntary that would go over there and help out food and, supplies and stuff for them for their 10 days while they were in quarantine. But I was saying for some families that were on the outskirts of the reservation, that lived out in the country, those people kind of had to come into town and stuff like that for fact, like they got the shot, so kind of spread around communities around that area partially, and it took up most of our adults and the kids. But
Good question.
And
And
that's
how
one
about for RA? Any questions for RA? Good summary. Any questions from Zoom? Because you're on Zoom doesn't mean you don't get the trivia. Camera's off. Now we can go.
Oh, my God.
I know. Now you can breathe. And you know, I don't have microphones. If I did order some, I can't remember. It was 2, 3 years ago when I got the camera. I think so. Love the education department's
You really don't
camera.
have a quiz for us?
No, this is Tommy Orange's there. So shut your computers down. We're gonna, then you can find a seat. Group is over. Thank you again. The post discussion for many groups is the best. And I made paper copies for all of us. Yeah, I'll get all of them. Everybody read there, on the orange? Are you nervous? Does it feel more nervous with a group or less? Because you guys were
I'm pretty whatever you can do about it.
you know, okay, give you all numbers. Way I can take attendance. Kaylee B, not here, Joyce, not here, Leland. Valera.
Here.
Oh, that really works there.
Yeah.
Alara, you're 1, Tracy 2, Katie, Bowen 3, Sanaya 4, Samira 5, Bree 6, Charnel here. Yep. Okay. Yep. I know I have to. I always check. 7, Colton 8, Ruben.
Yeah.
9, Jolene 10, Jolene not here. Okay. Jerry 10, Tawny 11, Nicole 12, Dylan 13, 11, 13, Rhiannon 14, Riley 15. All right, and you'll see some parts, and I know it's really tiny ink, size, but I tell you, I didn't want to fill too many trees. Okay, so everybody where it says all, you say it there, and then there'll be a couple chapter titles and other responses. If there is some bad language and you don't want to say the F-bomb, just omit them. Okay, so this is Reader's Theater for voices 1 through 20, spring semester. And I took this from Amazon Prime. Let us begin. All.
There.
1. Alara.
What story are we doing?
Oh yeah, they don't have a copy, do they?
I'm sorry. I read the last.
Can you go into the
3, 2, go.
Because I'm in the Unit 5 Readers Theater, and I'm just trying to figure out what story we're reading.
1 second.
The one flaw in technology, you can't have paper.
Yeah, you can. You fax. You can fax the paper over to the house. See. Just don't fax it, send that paper.
Oh, I have a question. Does anybody want extra credit?
I had those for you, man.
No, in here too.
Oh,
No?
what's the extra credit?
That's extra credit.
Going.
Hey.
Oh, wait, I'm very quiet. I don't talk over people. Let's find, where is he? They're there. Okay, Alara, we'll start all over. On Sunday at the North Dakota Heritage Center for free is an author from Leech Lake who's written a great, great book. I bought it a summer and a half ago and I'm reading it. David Troyer. And he's gonna speak about the heartbeat of Wounded Knee from 2 to 4 at the North Dakota Heritage Center. I'm offering 25 points extra credit. And is there anybody here that would want to go up there from 2 to 4? Okay, I know, and some can't. But I will put all the information in Google Classroom.
All right.
I gotta work.
There you go.
What's it called?
Where's that? North Dakota Heritage Center? Yeah. Where's
What is
that?
It's right by the Capitol.
Oh, yeah.
And the tickets, I just download,
I get. Well, bring it. I got one.
so I'll post all the information for it. He's fantastic. The book is fantastic. He does all qualitative, so he's got stories from everywhere. And he has his last chapter, I dig, it's called Digital Indians. And that's after the chapter about the casinos. But it's about what we're doing. You know, we're in stupid Google Classroom following blue links. You're in databases in the cloud. I mean, he's talking about us. And so when I read this a summer and a half ago, I'm like, oh my God, does he know? He's getting the information from people. You know, so I will post that in your classroom. Okay, let's try one more time. And any empties I'll do, because that's what I do. I do empties. I do 16, 17, 18.
Did you say there's some vulgar language in there?
Oh, there might be enough bomb. Although I might have omitted it. All right, here we go. One more time. All.
There. By Tommy Orange.
In the dark times, there will also be some.
Yes, there'll also be some.
About the dark times, Bertold Brecht.
All.
Indian head.
There was an Indian head.
The head of the knee.
Number 8.
Number 6. Yeah. It's on 16.
Oh my God. 8.
The head of the
Colton.
knee.
Oh, I knew it. What am I?
You have my permission to be here.
Wait a minute. Oh, what's my number again?
I don't know. Who are you?
Ruben. My 9?
You're 9.
All right, then.
I'm 16.
The drawing, or, hold on.
The head of an Indian.
Okay, thank you.
The drawing of the head of the headdress.
Long-haired Indian depicted.
Drawn by an unknown artist in 1939. Broadcast into the late 1970s to American TV everywhere after all the shows ran out. 13 is doing.
13?
Yes.
Oh, it was 16. It's called the Indian head test pattern.
If you left the TV on, you hear a phone.
Phone used the two instruments.
And you'd see that Indian surrounded by circles that looked like sights through rifle scopes. There was what looked like a bullseye in the middle of the screen with numbers like coordinates. The Indian head was just above the bullseye. Like all you'd need to do was nod up in agreement to set the sights on the target.
This was just a text.
In 1621, colonists invited Massasoit Wampanoags
To feast after a recent land meal.
Massasoit came with 90 of his men. That meal is why we still eat a meal. There was.
Number 12, together. That's Nicole.
Where's wrong? Oh, okay, sorry about that. 12, together in November.
Celebrate it as a nation.
But that one wasn't a Thanksgiving meal.
Oh,
It was land deal meal.
2 years later, there was another similar deal. And symbolized the crown.
200 Indians shot dead that night from
Samira, going once, twice, no attendance.
By the time Mosaic's son Mada Comet became chief,
Number 6, she's on Zoom.
Which line is it? I couldn't open the Google Docs for it.
It's open, it's being shared on the screen with the world. Number 6.
Metacomet, also known as King Philip, was forced to sign a peace treaty to give.
Above it.
One above it.
6, there was
no Indian pilgrim meals being eaten together.
Metacomet, also known as King Philip, was forced to sign a treaty to give up all of these.
3 of his men were hanged.
His brother Wamsuto was, let's say, very likely poisoned after being summoned and seized by the Plymouth court.
All of which led to the first official Indian War, the first war with Indians.
King Philip's War. 3 years later, the war was over and Metacomet was on the run.
He was caught on Benjamin Church, captain of the very first American Ranger Force and an Indian by the name of John Alderman.
Metacomet was beheaded and dismembered.
All.
quartered.
Entire 4 body sections to wood-by trees for the first floor.
John Alderman was given Metacomet,
which he kept in a jar of rum and for years took it around with him.
Charged people to see it.
Metacomet's head was sold to the Plymouth colony for 30 shillings.
The going rate for an Indian head at the time.
The head was spiked and carried through the streets of Plymouth before it was put on display at Plymouth Colony Forge for the next 25 years.
In 1637, anywhere from 400 to 700 Pequot were gathered for their annual green corn dance.
Colonists surrounded the Pequot village, set it on fire and
Shot any Pequot who tried to escape.
The next day, the Massachusetts Bay Colony had a feast in celebration.
Next day.
The Massachusetts Bay Colony had a feast in celebration.
And the governor declared it a day of Thanksgiving. 0.
All right, folks. Bring me your readers' leaders. We'll continue it after our group on Wednesday. Thank you, group number 1. Well done. You got that.
Reading it, I wasn't nervous.
Yeah, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the desk needs to be back to work for the next. Because I get my equipment and haul it down to my office. Thank you.
See you Monday.
See you later. Oh, it's Andrew.